Now it's our turn to, sorry for the words, but put our balls on the table.
Remember, kids, this is not how you play hockey. It's just ugly.
I like it.
Screw you guys. I'm doing this.
You know what? I love ice cream too.
Go back to Canada, Guy Lafleur.
Game on!
Yeah, game on.
Hello and welcome into another episode of the Hockey Show right here on Mile High Sports. Actually, our last regular season episode of the Hockey Show, which gets me all giddy and excited. We know watching the Avalanche play the last month or so, they can't wait for the playoffs as well. Here we are, JJ Jerez, Ryan Bolding, coming to break down all things in the hockey world. Of course, if you're watching online, you could see that I'm sitting here by myself as Ryan strolls his way into the studio, just disrespecting all of our time, hates every single one of us, but I'll carry the weight till he gets in. He should be in any moment now. So as we start every episode, actually a couple things I want to get to first before we get into our matinee money. Of course, we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to look at the West standings and that playoff race. The current state of the Avalanche, we're going to get into that and what lies ahead for them. And, of course, there's been some news around the world. I mean, Danny, I don't know how much hockey news you pay attention to. Of course, Danny Bailey behind the glass for us. But last week we discussed the passing away of New York Islanders great Mike Bossy. Not even a week later, we have another former NHL great passing away in Guy Lafleur. Special place in our hearts, too, because he's part of our intro, right? Go back to Canada, Guy Lafleur. So we've got to get into the Guy Lafleur situation. I guess how much does that hit the non-hockey world? I know you're very much a basketball guy, very much NFL. You're dabbling in the hockey world this year, but how much does that spread outside of the hockey culture?
Well, it's always sad to lose a legend when it's sad to lose anybody, sports or outside the world of sports, but it's definitely sad when it's a legendary player for a franchise and just a huge cornerstone of a team that is a big part of the NHL's history. So, yeah, to lose Mike Bossy and then Guy Lafleur, and then, of course, we had Alex Ovechkin, who made history tying something that Mike Bossy was another one to do in the NHL. So it just kind of puts things in perspective that life is short and make the most of the moments that are sweet. So enjoy your sports and enjoy greatness while it's happening.
Absolutely. I mean, especially here on the Hockey Show, right? We also had Gilbert Gottfried pass away recently. So there you go. Guy Lafleur, Gilbert Gottfried, two parts of the Hockey Show, literally. We'll have to pay our respects in the next segment here. But Ryan's in the house. What's up, Ryan? How you doing? Are you ready to talk some hockey news?
I'm ready.
All right, well, let's get into it. Matinee money is what we always start every show with. So today we've got a game about to drop the puck in about 5 minutes, and that is the Rangers at Boston Bruins. We're going with the same game parlay on this one with the money line, taking the Rangers here, and the under 5.5 points. I mean, I think there's two things to look at when you look at this matchup. Two good teams, right? Two teams that are definitely in the playoffs and definitely going to make noise in the playoffs, but you also like the way the Rangers have been looking the last few months. Rangers are suddenly becoming a lot of people's underdog picks to maybe upset some bigger teams here in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think, I put $10 down on this. I picked the Rangers and the under. The Rangers have won 2 of 3 so far against Boston. I think they're the hotter club, too. Which is saying something. Boston's fighting for the wild card spot right now. I mean, I think they're in. You got the Islanders were eliminated, so the East is set. I'm being dumb. The East is set, but it's kind of that final positioning, jockeying with Pittsburgh, who's beaten Detroit today. So it matters for Boston, but they've been struggling. I feel like the real risky pick was the under 5.5, but the last game was a 2-1 game. Shesterkin has been playing phenomenally. So, my bet is really on a tight game.
I think it's more than a guess. It's an educated guess, right? I think you're using some rationale and reason. And like we said last week, heading into these playoffs, you'd expect the teams to have their notch turned up a little bit, maybe be a little bit defensively tighter than they normally would. And just play a closer, more playoff style game, especially when it's kind of like, hey, let's start feeling each other out and get ready for playoff caliber hockey.
Yeah, I like it. It's a potential preview. I like where the Rangers are at. I think, they've been an impressive team to watch this year, but you got conundrums and guys like Panarin who like to go hot and go cold on and off, and a little bit of the same for Boston. And then Swayman has been up and down this year in net, and Allmark was hurt, so it's an interesting matchup. It was the only one I felt comfortable taking. Like, I've been watching some of that the Buffalo Islanders game, and it's like, man, I'm so glad I didn't put money on this.
Yep, indeed. So let's look at the Western Conference standings, the playoff race, if you will. It really seems like it's coming down to two teams, Dallas or Vegas, right? I mean, LA was able to kind of right the ship after we counted them out last week. I mean, we saw that game with the Avalanche where they lost 9-3. It definitely seemed like they were trending the wrong direction, but they flipped a switch and they were able to turn on and kind of resurrected that. So it seems like they're going to be able to squeak into the playoffs. But with Vegas and Dallas, both teams aren't playing good hockey. I mean, you had Dallas go up into Canada and have an opportunity to seize some major points here, and they lost 3 games in a row up there. Tonight they get the Seattle Kraken, which might be a little bit of a break, but we've seen even against the Colorado Avalanche, Seattle Kraken are playing some good hockey, especially with the addition of Matt Beniers. So Dallas is kind of striking me as the team that's just not playing where they need to be playing right now and might find themselves on the outside looking in.
Yeah, basically their magic number is 99, right? So Vegas could still hit 97 points. I don't know what the tiebreakers are there. So for me, Dallas's magic number is 99. They've got to win out.
Regulation wins is the tiebreaker. Not even overtime anymore. Just
Right.
purely regulation.
And I don't have that in my cool little NHL app for absolutely zero reason.
Thanks,
So,
NHL.
but yeah, if I'm Dallas, I want to win out. I want to set the tone. I want to go into playoffs with some success, with some oomph, right? And so Vegas, I mean, they're coming on, but there's some question marks and things that are going on there that we'll have to talk about later. And I just feel like Dallas is starting to look like the odd man out.
And, I mean, if you're Colorado, who really cares, right? I mean, we're going to get into the Avalanche here in a second, but looking at Colorado, their form isn't exactly where they want it to be either, right? But I think you see both of these two teams who are potentially going to take that 8th spot backing their way into the playoffs. Neither of them are playing good hockey. Neither of them are really stealing the position from the other. I think that gives Colorado a little bit of insurance, like, all right, we're having some injuries probably going to be coming back during that first round. It's going to be a nice way to ease them back into to playoff caliber hockey, just like I keep bringing up.
I think winning the President's Trophy is a goal. Finishing first in the league is a goal. I think now it's not a possibility, but there was a shot that the Avalanche, led by Jared Bednar, could be just the 4th team in NHL history to put up 60 wins in a season or more. And that went out the window with the last 2 losses. But, what the Avalanche are doing is exceptional. And Jared Bednar has said down the stretch he is going to shuffle lines around and rest some people and let them heal up those bumps and bruises, right? So Taves has been out for the Avalanche. You've seen Eric Johnson has been out. You saw Mikko Rantanen is sick. Like, now is the time for these little things to happen. These last games don't really matter. Sure, you'd like to take some momentum into the playoffs and be feeling good about yourself, but like the Avalanche clinched the top of the West like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it's like, these games don't matter.
I agree, and that's kind of the basis of my point, right? I'd like them to be kind of gearing up and getting into that momentum and that playoff-style hockey now, but considering what lies ahead, I feel like they can kind of roll the dice a little bit and start to really get into their playoff groove during that first round.
Yeah, and I think, too, the game against Edmonton in particular was impressive on Edmonton's level. Like, they're a legitimate threat here, I think, going into the playoffs. They've got kind of the right things. Darnell Nurse leaves the game early, but, Edmonton is a team, when we're talking playoffs, that I don't know that I want to play.
I mean, you look at the last couple matchups between Edmonton and Colorado, and it was the same thing. Edmonton put up a really good fight. Colorado had to earn their victories, and they did by the skin of their teeth. But you definitely felt Edmonton is absolutely capable of beating the Avalanche. And back to Dallas and Vegas. As I said, Dallas playing tonight in Seattle. Vegas also has an easy upcoming game tomorrow against San Jose. But then on Tuesday,
this is the game.
On Tuesday, the Vegas Knights head to Dallas, and they will pretty much play for their season that night, it feels.
If Vegas wins this game, that's a huge step for them. If they lose this game, it's over. If they lose any game, it's over, right? Unless Dallas just has this kind of epic collapse. I mean, they're 2 points behind Dallas, but this is the biggest game of the year for them.
And, of course, they're going to have to do it possibly missing their starting goaltender. And Laurent Brossoit has been kind of in and out of the lineup with injuries as well. So, again, just another testament to how neither of these teams are in top form, are in, hey, let's make a playoff run form. They're both kind of who has the least bad things happen to them kind of mindset right now.
And then you got Vancouver just waiting in the wings, right? They're 4 points behind Dallas, 2 points behind Vegas, but they're there. You know, they're doing their best to, if they win out, what they got 94 points, I think is the best that they could do here. So 95, I mean, it's possible they make the playoffs if these other teams kind of can't figure it out.
And that's what's a little bit disappointing, because it feels like Vancouver, especially since Bruce Boudreau's appearance, right? They feel like they might be the most deserving of that 8th spot, but they dug themselves way too big of a hole early on in the season that, you know, that's why you play the 82 games. But you would like, because if you've seen the record since Bruce Boudreau's joined the team, they're on pace for an unreal season. It was a little bit too little too late.
Too little too late. A slump after his big push when he first came in, you know, after the bump. Those things hurt. Injuries have really hurt a lot of teams, except for the Avalanche, you know, this season. Sure, you could say the Avalanche have faced their fair share of injuries and has hurt the club, but only in just having astronomical numbers, which they've already had, you know? So I don't think the Avs are the victims of the injury bug much in the same way that a lot of these other teams are.
So magic numbers 99. Let's throw some predictions at the wall. Who gets there, Dallas or Vegas? Who is the Colorado Avalanche's first round opponent?
Oh, this is tough. Like, it depends on which camp of Avalanche fan you're in, right? If you're an old school Avs fan, you want to see Dallas and a little revenge for the Marty Turco era. You know what I mean? If you're a newer Avs fan and you hate Vegas with the undying passion that so many fans do, you want to see them come in against an injury-laden, crippled Vegas team and kind of kick them out. You know, take it back to them, regain some confidence from years past. But I mean, neither team is a team that I think is just going to totally roll over. You know, it's not going to be like that Blues playoff series.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas has one very potent line, but I think from a defensive standpoint, they just know how to beat Colorado. Where I like what you're saying, Avalanche or the Vegas Golden Knights just are a little bit broken right now. I think it's a perfect time to see them in the first round for Colorado and do exactly like I'm saying. Get used to playoff hockey during the first round. Won't be too much sweat off your back playing a disheveled team like the Vegas Golden Knights right now.
Yeah, either I don't. I guess I don't even know. The Avs will probably trounce whoever they play in the first round. I felt like that Blues series. What was that last playoffs? I expected more out of St. Louis than we got. I guess I may be overvaluing either of these teams, but you know, I think each one has a little bit of you know, some magic that can help them. I think Ottinger really helps Dallas. I think, you know, if you get Ben and Sagan and those guys going, if you've got Heiskanen going, you know, like,
and Robertson,
yeah, and
they're ace up their sleeve.
I mean, Radulov, like they've got some pieces. Robertson, and then on the other hand, you've got Vegas, and they have a little bit of a, you know, rent-free space in Colorado's head. They've got a little bit of a surprise. They've got guys like Mark Stone and Match Pacioretty. They've got Jack Eichel who's going now. You know, like they're not really to be counted out, but they're definitely a team that hasn't been able to really fire on all cylinders here.
Well, I love the idea of retribution, right? The revenge for the Colorado Avalanche. So as you said, 99 seems to be the magic number. We'll see who gets in, because it's all going to unfold in the next week. Before we are back in these seats talking more NHL hockey with our listeners, this will all be decided. So exciting stuff. We're less than a week away from
we made it.
going.
We're there.
We're there. So, yeah, stick around through the break right here on the Hockey Show. We'll be back. We got plenty more to touch on. A lot of things happened this week, and, of course, a lot of storylines to follow. So, JJ Jerez, Ryan Bolding made it into the show. Coach Bailey behind the glass right here on Mile High Sports. We'll be right back.
Right now, it's 16 minutes past the big hour. Is that not right, Mr. Scream? Great, good stuff. I think people are getting really cranked.
If you picture Mr. Scream, but more angry, that was me on my ride over here today.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of, I guess, fun in his voice, right?
Yeah. I apologize to whatever neighborhood I went like 50 through on my way over here around construction.
Just the scene in Mr. Scream, right? Wayne's World 2.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, good stuff.
It really paints the picture of what the radio scene was like in the early 90s, right? They could afford to pay a guy to just be Mr. Scream back in the 90s. Of course, it's fiction, it's just a movie, but still kind of makes you see the difference in the radio landscape from 2022 to what, maybe 92? We'll throw that one at?
I mean, Howard Stern is Howard Stern, but I always think about his movie, which I can't really think of the name of.
Private Parts.
And it's a great movie. I think I've seen it, over the years a couple times when it's on TV, and I always just think about, the shtick and stuff that went on terrestrial radio at the time, and how he was kind of on the forefront of pushing the boundaries, but there was a lot of silliness. When you think of all the radio greats who just had this crazy name.
Like Paul Harvey?
No.
Paul Harvey News. Good day.
I was thinking of I don't know, Coyote Band Jack or something. I don't know.
Oh.
That's it,
but Uncle Nasty.
But that's how those people are known. Yeah, even Uncle Nasty. But those people, old legacy DJs like the 60s, when they died, it was well, Coyote Jack died. And everybody's like, oh man. And you're like, who?
All right, well, let's get back to
Anyway,
hockey.
Mr. Scream.
Mr. Scream. If I'm in Vegas, I think I'm Mr. Scream myself, right? As we mentioned, it doesn't seem like they're playing the right type of hockey, and now their starting goaltender, who no one was really in love with in the first place there in Vegas, is now apparently down and out. So, I mean, he kind of was all year long, right? Kind of in and out of the lineup with various injuries, various problems. And just in hindsight, I think if you're Vegas, you're still kicking yourself in the butt for that Marc-Andre Fleury trade.
Yeah, that one hurts. Not going after a goalie at the trade deadline hurts. The situation isn't ideal for them, and maybe it's kind of a bit of a write-off from management at this point. But, I mean, we have this giant question mark about Robin Lehner, and now it's just become a bit of a game where we don't know if he's going to play in the near future or not. Right?
Yeah.
ESPN comes out with this report, Emily Kaplan, that Robin Lehner's going to have knee surgery. Jesse Granger from The Athletic confirms it. And then Pete DeBoer says, nah, he's just taking a maintenance day. He'll be back tomorrow. And then to double down, Vegas said today that he's taking another maintenance day. I don't know if this is a giant middle finger to the media, or if it's just them having fun, or what it is. But it's now strange.
At 30 years of age, I think we now know what Robin Lehner is as a goaltender. We've seen his ceiling. If anything, it's behind him. So that being said, I'm just still perplexed by the ideology there in Vegas to have kept this guy and moved on from a potential Vezina. I mean, he had just won the Vezina, right? So
Fleury is old too.
But he's still he passes the eye test.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying. Robin Lehner,
I'm not arguing against
has
you.
Failed my eye test since he stepped in the league. I remember sitting there watching him when he was in Buffalo. I remember I sat next to him one time during an Avalanche morning skate, him and Evander Kane, when they were both still in Buffalo. So I kept a close eye on this goaltender, and not once in his career has he stricken me as a starting capable goaltender, as a goaltender that can get a team not only to the playoffs but through them, right? So I still just don't understand the thought process from the Vegas powers that be to have held on to this guy for so long. And listening to Pete DeBoer, what does Pete DeBoer know about goaltending? Clearly nothing. So, yeah, I'm furious. If I'm a Vegas fan, part of me wants to burn my jersey just because of how terribly they managed the team over last offseason.
Well, I think you had to pick one of the two, and they picked the younger of the two, right? Think of all the people when we talked about Fleury getting traded, and should the Avs trade for Fleury at the beginning of the year, when it seems ridiculous now, but the Avalanche goaltending wasn't great at the start of the year. Should Fleury be a guy the Avs trade for? And everybody's like, he's too old to carry a team to the Stanley Cup, right? But now you look at Minnesota, and they've got 2 over 30 goalies who are playing pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at Vegas, and they've got this guy who's been hurt. I would say he was playing fairly well until whenever this injury started. But they had to pick one. The real head scratcher is just not going, okay, this guy is having problems. We've got Brossoit coming up, but maybe he's not there. Maybe he'll never be there. I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him myself. We need something in the meantime. When you're betting on a guy who is maybe dealing with an injury throughout the season, like, you're in a bad spot. And financially, I don't know how they made it work, right? Like, they would have had to trade other guys, other pieces. Maybe they trade Dodonov to somebody not on his no trade clause. But, like, they have to figure something out, and they bet on a guy that must have been dealing with some injuries that he couldn't deal with any longer.
And then not to mention getting rid of Ryan Reeves as well during last offseason, and then the acquisition of Jack Eichel, which clearly isn't panning out the way anybody intended it to. So I think there's some stones that need to be thrown at Vegas management.
Well, and you have to say, like, Reeves went to New York where his former coach Gallant is. So, that was definitely an encouraging piece that Gallant wanted for his team. And I think he's done fairly well for it,
Well, let's get to Kirill Kaprizov. Gets his 100th point the other day, and the first player in Minnesota Wild history to do so. I want to rewind and take you back into time, Ryan, when you and I, when we discussed with Mike Rousseau. He came onto this show. Now that immediately qualifies him as a friend of the show, right?
Yeah.
And it was still, I think it was maybe 14 games into Kaprizov's career, and everybody was all over this guy. Everybody was already saying, this is the best player the Minnesota Wild have ever had. We asked Mike Rousseau. He confirmed. So it's crazy to see less than a year later, while there might have still been doubts while we had that conversation with Mike Rousseau, that now I think it's pretty obvious he is indeed the best player on this team, the best player they've ever had. They just paid him a fat payday. A lot of people were saying, man, that might be a little bit too early. Now I think it's justified. They made the right move there.
Well, and he won the Calder. He's playing with some good talent. I mean, I don't think anybody saw Minnesota kind of going this direction. But when you have guys like Ryan Hartman having a career year. You've got Kaprizov at one point was playing with Zuccarello. I think they're reunited. Now they're racing for the most assists in franchise history. Every time one of them scores, the other assists, and that record changes. You got Boldy playing pretty well. You've got Cam Talbot having a resurgence in his career. You trade for Marc-Andre
I didn't
Fleury.
see that coming.
Me either. I didn't really like the Kakko trade, but at this point, I mean, it's making sense. There was no way you could keep both of them. I don't know that they needed a goalie change, really. But here we are. Both guys are playing very well. You've got, depth in the lineup. You've got guys scoring up and down. They've lost, a handful of games in regulation in the last couple months. Like, this is a team that is legitimate. And, yeah, he's very much an engine. You just watch him. He's, as eye-opening as Cale Makar can be and his edge work and what he can do, I feel like Kaprizov is sort of the forward equivalent of that.
Yeah, I hear that. I think a lot of Avs fans right now are excited to see St. Louis versus Minnesota because a lot of people think they're going to be beating up on each other, right? So that way, once the second round comes, maybe they're a little bit depleted. I don't know how much I buy into either of those teams being particularly dangerous. I think I like their style. They definitely play playoff styles, but I'm not sure they have enough ammunition in there to really pose a threat. But I'm excited to see what they bring because they have that effort. They have that team chemistry. They've got a really close locker room, it seems, at least from the outside, that I think they have what it takes to make some noise, but might be still lacking some talent here and there.
Yeah, I mean, only time will tell, but they're no slouch. I mean, they're second in the Central, and what are they, 9 points behind the Avalanche?
I hear you.
They have the second best point record in the West, so I'm not saying you're wrong and that they aren't a slouch, but I do think that they're a pretty lethal team.
In sports, we love to talk about open windows, right? I think the Avalanche window is wide open right now. Can't get any more open. Minnesota's is now starting to open. So I think we're going to see a lot of progress from the Minnesota Wild in years to come.
If I'm an Avalanche fan, I mean, it's not like Minnesota's gone on and won the Stanley Cup recently, but for all the years of the Avalanche's struggles, I'd be kind of upset at how quickly Minnesota kind of went from maybe we need to retool to we're in it.
Yep. Exactly. And yeah, I mean, coming into the season, it was kind of, you didn't know what to expect from them. I predicted them to not even be in the playoffs. So we see how much they've surprised already in such little time. With that, Kirill Kaprizov being the first Minnesota Wild player to get 100 points. Steven Stamkos passes Martin St. Louis and is the highest point getter for the Tampa Bay Lightning franchise history at 956 points. Steven Stamkos, not a surprise there. I think this is a guy kind of every hockey fan roots for, right? He's not exactly somebody who pushes people the wrong way or rubs people the wrong way, I guess is the proper phrase there. He kind of just puts his head down and works hard, tries to play through injuries like we saw in the bubble. So, yeah, I think you talk to any hockey fan out there, nobody would say anything but nice work, Steven Stamkos, on that franchise record.
Yeah, one of his goals that stands out to me is that bubble goal where he had missed like most of the season in the postseason. He comes out and he just crushes that clapper and gets hurt, and that was it.
That was it. One goal.
But it's a guy. The craziest thing to me, and I think about it every time I hear Barry Melrose talk, and I can't remember who it was. It may have been John Buccigross during a broadcast where they credited Barry Melrose with coaching Steven Stamkos. And I was like, man, if that isn't the most revisionist history in NHL, like the most revisionist history in the NHL. Yeah. I mean, he coached 16 games for Tampa. That was it. Barry Melrose's NHL coaching career was 16 games. And he got fired, and part of the reason was he refused to play Steven Stamkos as a rookie, And now you look at where Stamkos is, and you're like, wow, every day and every point makes that look even worse than it did at the time. But Stamkos has gone on to have this incredible career, and I mean, he's a guy who had a rib removed because he was having blood clots and embolisms, and like his career was uncertain. His future was uncertain at that point. And he said he was happy that on his 956 point, it was a goal, he was assisted by Kucherov and Hedman. Two guys he's played with a long time, and Kucherov hit 600 points too in that game. Like it's crazy to think that the difference in years between the two of them and where they are in points. Like it says a lot about Kucherov's talent.
I think Steven Stamkos, there's a few guys you look around the league who wear the C on their sweater and you say, abso-freaking-lutely, this guy is a captain in every sense of the word. I think Gabe Landeskog is one of those guys, and I think Steven Stamkos is one of those guys, right? There's no other option on that team who would be a better captain. Sure, there are good captains on there. Hedman comes to mind, but to actually have the C and just represent everything about being a captain, I think that's just what Steven Stamkos is. So I love the guy, rooting for him. Maybe not too much in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but good to see him get that kind of accolade and put him over a guy like Martin St. Louis because you know how they view him in Tampa Bay.
And, I mean, he's potentially in the twilight of his career. He's played 38, he hasn't played. He's having a down year, but still putting up the numbers.
Yep. I mean, let's see what they do in the playoffs. You know their mindset these last couple of years is just let's just get in and then we turn it on. With that, as we wrap up this segment of the show, we got to get to Guy Lafleur. The passing of Guy Lafleur obviously sad around the hockey world. What it really makes me think about is I rewind, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago when Jean Beliveau died, right? And I remember us asking Patrick Waugh about it, and Patrick Waugh talking about how Jean Beliveau was a big part of his growing up. He was one of his favorite players with the Canadiens. But our generation, we didn't get to see much Jean Beliveau. For us, when I picture old school Montreal Canadiens, I picture Guy Lafleur. I picture that hair. I picture him skating around and buzzing around people and that flow and his sweater flowing behind him. So I feel like Guy Lafleur, as impactful as we saw the Jean Beliveau passing, it feels like Guy Lafleur is going to be a little bit more of a stinger.
Yeah, I mean, it's the passing of the torch. These guys are getting older. They're not going to be around forever. I'm not saying he was, ancient, but I mean, he had an impact on not this current generation of player, but the one before, right? The guys who are in hockey now, the coaches, the GMs, those guys. Like, Patrick Waugh played 4 games against him, but also, played with him and appreciated playing with him. Joe Sakic played with him.
I think that, so obviously it was before our time, but from what I've heard and my research, it sounds like the Quebec Nordiques brought Guy Lafleur on just for Joe Sakic, just as kind of a mentorship thing. So obviously right there we have the direct impact on what it's done for Colorado hockey. I mean, Guy Lafleur, if he was chosen to mentor Joe Sakic for a little bit, now what we're seeing Joe Sakic do, obviously a part of his philosophy.
I mean, Patrick Waugh said as a kid, every night he would watch him play on TV and then go play hockey in the hallway. And he, they would be Ken Dryden and Guy Lafleur and those guys. Like, he idolized him and then got to sit close to him in the locker room. There's a lot of hockey history is kind of fading away, which is one part of the saddest part about it. But you still have these incredible stories by guys like Waugh. I'm sure Joe Sakic has stories. The stories coming around the league, stuff that, Lindy Ruff, I mean, that guy is like an encyclopedia of hockey knowledge and history and has great quotes on stuff like this. Like, it's the end of a real era in hockey as these legends, these great ones start to go.
Well, especially the old Canadians, right? They're kind of the New York Yankees of the hockey world. So for a while it was just them, and then I think the torch got passed to the Islanders. So that's another thing. We don't really see these dynasties exist the way they did when these guys were playing, and they were kind of in one group and sticking together. So, yeah, rest in peace, Guy Lafleur, rest in peace, Mike Bossy, and rest in peace, Gilbert Godfrey, all parts of our show, really. Well, I guess Mike Bossy, not really.
I mean, yeah, we've got a Guy Lafleur joke in our intro.
I know. Definitely impacts us directly. So that'll do it halfway through the hockey show, today's edition, the final regular season edition. Ryan, we're spanning over 3 seasons now. I can't believe how long we've been here talking hockey, and they still let us back every single Saturday. So, of course, we'll be back next Saturday to talk more playoff hockey.
Probably.
And we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Probably.
After the break here.
We got to know what the playoff schedule is like.
I looked it up. I think we're safe. But, yeah, we'll be right back. Talk some Avs after the break. So, JJ Jerez, Ryan Bolding, Danny Bailey behind the glass right here on Mile High Sports.
Let's go, Colorado!
And we're back. Welcome to the Hockey Show. JJ Jerez, Ryan Bolding, talking all things hockey. Colorado's biggest and best live hockey radio show right here on Mile High Sports. Who would have thought? Avalanche have 4 games to go in the season. 2 home, 2 away. However, the last 3 games have been 3 losses. Not something we're used to seeing from the Colorado Avalanche. Of course, there's the mindset of, oh, well, the Avalanche have been waiting to get in the playoffs since the trade deadline, right? It's just been coast, coast, coast all the way. And then, of course, there's my argument of, man, I really wish they could be buzzing right now, being in their top form heading into the playoffs. So, with 4 games to go, Ryan, your opinion on the current state of the Avalanche after losing 3 in a row here?
Yeah, I'm not real concerned about it. I think that they're in a perfectly fine spot. And everything we've heard from Jared Bednar about, resting these guys and doing kind of lineup changes and stuff, it is what it is. You're getting one final glimpse of what it looks like to see Curtis McDermott playing defense, against teams fighting for playoffs. Like, you may not see him much. Maybe if the Avs end up playing the Blues or the Wild, he slots back in as a 4th line forward, or he's there if they need him on defense, But I don't think he's had the best outings the last couple games. Things like that. But you got to think this is a team that's hoping Landeskog is getting close. They've got Kadri back. I mean, he scores a point like immediately on Cale Makar's goal there against Seattle. So he seems to generally be back. I don't know if he's 100% or if he's just not going 100%. He doesn't seem as physically aggressive, I'd say. But you're looking at, both Johnsons probably rotating more and more. Taves getting healed up, so things are in flux. And once this team is back where they want, I asked Jared Bednar how nice it is, but Nichushkin is still on this 7-game point streak now. He's playing exceptionally well. Two goals last night against Edmonton. He loves that far side post shot on goalies. It seems to be working. And I asked him how important it is that he's going and how nice that is. And he said, would I love to have him and Landeskog on a line together? Sure. Would I love to have him on one line and Landeskog on another line? Sure. But that's not where we are right now, So help is coming. I'm not too concerned about where the Avalanche are at or what it says about where they're trending. But you do hope that they don't get a little complacent on the way.
I think there's something to be said, and this is a point I brought up on Hockey Mountain High, about the experimentation Jared Bednar is still kind of going through. It feels like he's still kind of figuring out what he has with some of the newer guys, right? Trying to figure out the best way, the best combinations, just the best way to utilize everything that he's got in front of him right now. And it feels like the clock is ticking. Like I said, 4 games to go. and I don't think he has all that figured out, as at least maybe not as much as he'd like to have it figured out at this point. So then you got to insert Gabe Landeskog. Who knows how his form's really going to be when he's back? I mean, hopefully he's at 100%. We all assumed he's going to get this knee surgery. He's going to be ready for the playoffs, so hopefully that's still the case. But I think there's still kind of too many unknowns for me to really be comfortable this close to the playoffs.
I'm not concerned with any of it. Like, I think that Bednar knows exactly what he has, and he's afforded the luxury of just getting to try this or that strange scenario and see how it works. You know, like, if he doesn't have to play Taves and Makar together, he won't. But that's the go-to shutdown, stand up, eat minutes line, right? If he can pair a stronger guy and a weaker guy, if he can keep a Johnson with a Byram, right? If he can mix Manson and Gerard if he needs to, and still, slide one up to Makar, slide one down with Taves, whatever it needs to be. Like, all of these options are there, and now he's just getting to play around with these kind of extreme scenarios.
I think the two guys that raise the most question marks for me are Arturi Lehkonen, because he seems to be able to fit into any lineup you put, line you put him on.
And
so,
power play, penalty kill.
So where do you put him to maximize his utility, right? You don't want to bury him too low on the line, not give him too many minutes. And then Andrew Cogliano still strikes me as a guy that's trying to figure out where he belongs on the team. Obviously, it's the fourth line. He hasn't played anything but the fourth line. But I'm not sure he's making the impact that anybody expected of him. So
he's 100% a penalty killer. And if you watch him on the penalty kill, watch him at morning skate on the penalty kill. Like, he is voracious. He's tenacious. He's fast. He's locked into that. That's his role. Is he going to be scoring on breakaways every night? No. But to me, it's like when we had Carl Soderberg and, Blake Como in town on the PK. Like, those guys, they weren't the flashiest guys otherwise, but they did a pretty good job on the PK. They scored like 6 shorthanded goals between the two of them, something like that. But, I think Cogliano is strictly that. And he's been dinged up a little bit too, and in and out of the lineup. And you've got Darren Helm. For me, if you're looking at who falls out of this lineup at the bottom, it's Logan O'Connor, and it's probably Darren Helm. And you keep Cogliano in there, you play him 5 minutes a game, and you give him all the PK time he can handle.
I think that's fair. I think that Logan O'Connor, as of late, has really proven to not be too effective. I mean, he had a nice little flash in the pan early in the season, and we thought, oh, wow, we got this guy on such a steal. But no,
he was playing on the top line.
He's definitely fallen off since. And then Darren Helm seems to be Jared Bednar's first option for scratches at any given moment. Of course, he brings an awesome veteran presence, great penalty-killing presence, but anytime there's a decision that needs to be made from Jared Bednar, it seems like Darren Helm gets the worst of that decision.
The real question mark I think we need to discuss is goaltending here.
Mm-hmm.
Pavel Francouz takes a puck to the face off a Connor McDavid kind of tip out of the zone, and it made me think how interesting it is that of all the people sitting on the bench, only goalies don't have a helmet on. Like, you go to the beer league level, you can't even coach on the bench without a helmet on, for insurance reasons. So it's interesting to me that I don't expect goalies to have to wear their helmet, but it is interesting that they aren't required to. And this is kind of the consequence of that. Like, I don't know if he's not looking, he doesn't expect it to be tipped, but puck hits him in the face close to his eye. He's out. The Avs recall Justus Anunen. But we don't know the state of Francouz's health.
I mean,
we're going into the playoffs.
As somebody who's taken a puck to the head, it stinks, but he'll be back.
It stinks.
It stinks. He might miss a few days, nothing more. I mean, a couple stitches and a couple bags of ice, he'll be right back to where he was. But yeah, with the helmet thing, I'm with that. I think it's a strange thing that only one person is allowed to not rock a helmet. I mean, look at the rules on ice, right? You lose your helmet when you're playing, you have to go straight to the bench or put it on right away, right? So these rules are starting to tighten up. I'm surprised it hasn't affected the backup goalie yet. I don't know how it's going to affect it because I can't see any of them saying, yeah, I'm putting my helmet on. As a goalie myself, growing up, whenever there was a game that I didn't play, I did everything I could to get away with not wearing my helmet on the bench. Never got away with it. My coaches always yelled at me. I'd yell at them back. And,
you need to earn more time on the bench.
You get an idea of where my attitude was as a player. But it never made sense to me. But seeing it happen like this, obviously from a coach's standpoint, from an owner's standpoint, even from a fan standpoint, you want your players to be healthy and you want to minimize freak accidents, right?
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, if that puck hits him where his hat is or hits his brim or whatever, it's a close shave, but you're hoping it didn't get him in the eye.
Yep.
I mean, Patrick Waugh's brother is a guy who lost his playing career with an eye injury. Like
I had a former coach. He spent 3 games with the St. Louis Blues. Took a stick, I think it was, to the eye. Never played again.
Wasn't it Wayne Gretzky's brother maybe too that had something like that? I don't know. I didn't do my one-eyed hockey player history. I know Carl Soderberg, and that's about it. But it's scary, and it begs the question, right? You're not gonna make coaches and trainers and all those people wear helmets. They get hit with pucks all the time. They usually get their hands up. I don't know if you saw Jamie Benn getting just crushed into the bench against Edmonton the other night. Skates up at coach face level, and you're just putting your hands up like, cut my arms, not my face. It's scary stuff can happen in this game, and you're surprised more freak accidents don't happen like this. But I mean, you're sitting right there. It's not like you're in that backup goalie spot at Bell Center where you're just like the other side of the ice in the stands by yourself on a stool.
Got to be on your toes. Plus, he's got his gloves there. Just maybe work on those reflexes a little bit. Last thing I wanted to get to, Avalanche related, before we have to get out for another break here, is you brought him up a couple times, Devon Toews. Now, he's been out of the lineup for all 3 of these losses. Is he proving to be a bigger X factor than he's been given credit for? Obviously, he's been given plenty of credit. Everybody loves what he brings to the table. But the Cale Makar, Devon Toews pairing, one is a little bit more of a fan favorite than the other. I think Devon Toews really showing his value by missing these last 3 games.
I think it's very telling when having a conversation about the Norris Trophy and Cale Makar's fit, right? Because a lot of people, just like with the Hart, think that who you play with is everything. And so who Cale Makar has played with mostly is Toews, as opposed to Yossi, who's had a couple of partners who are not Devon Toews. Some people think that hurts Cale Makar's Norris Trophy chances. I talked to Jared Bednar about this, and he thought, maybe Devon Toews deserves some consideration for the Norris as well, for the way he's been playing. But also, your utilization, who you play with, it's not up to you, right? You just do what you do with who you're given to work with. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's been a real benefit, and maybe he is the glue kind of keeping this team together. I tweeted last night that maybe Rantanen is the glue keeping this team together, just because, offensively, he's kind of been the only guy there through the McKinnon injuries, the Landeskog injuries, the Kadri injuries, and all of a sudden, he's out with a non-COVID illness, and the wheels are kind of, bouncing, jiggling.
And Rantanen is quietly, but consistently been adding points. Having a
career year.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, yeah, two very impactful pieces there. I heard a fun idea. The Jennings Trophy each year given to the best goalie tandem, right? Why don't they have a similar award for defensive tandems if we're going to start to use that as a reason people don't get Norris trophies?
Yeah, maybe it's I like that idea.
Right on. Well, we got a mixed bag skate to get to. This show's just flying by. Maybe it's just the fact that it's the end of the regular season. We got a lot to talk about. I don't know. Maybe we're just happy to be here because
the
time
wind is just blowing all that time away.
Time flies when you're having fun. So hopefully it's flying for everybody listening as well. We'll be right back through the break to get to the mixed bag skate. A couple more fun topics to get to. This is the Hockey Show right here on My High Sports. JJ Jerez, Ryan Boulding, Danny Bailey.
I play hockey and I fornicate because those are the 2 most fun things in cold weather.
Boy, are they. Welcome back, the Hockey Show. JJ Jerez, Ryan Boulding, Danny Bailey, Coach Bailey, we like to call him, here for the mixed bag skate. The AC/DC bringing us in, getting me pumped. This just makes me think of pumped stuff.
This makes me think of Iron Man. We were talking Marvel movies off mic.
It makes me think of playoff hockey. Like, this is such a good, commercial song, right, for getting people amped. It's like in the arena, right? They've gotten away with so many of those. They've gotten away from the little videos that they like to throw up for the fans to kind of rile them up, right? Like I want all of you to get up out of your seat.
Yeah.
I think it was from MASH. They've gotten away from someone. Or Tommy Boy. That was awesome.
They've done the Happy Gilmore one a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's make a little noise.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that they're used sparingly because they aren't licensed and they don't want to get in trouble. And it's funny you mentioned that because I saw on Reddit a video of an Avs Open that was posted on the Tool subreddit, Tool the band.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an Avs intro to a new Tool song from their last album that just rips. And they were like, oh, the Avalanche did this. And somebody cross-posted it to the Avalanche subreddit, and they're like, what happened with this? And that was the first I'd seen it. It's old enough that Grubauer's face was still in the video and stuff, So I went to the source. I was like, you guys had a Tool intro? I need to hear this. I need to see this. Where is it? And essentially, I was told that they were basically taken down by the recording industry in that these videos were being recorded and posted online, and then the recording industry was seeing them and then coming to the organization and saying, you're not licensing this stuff, you need to pay us for this. That's why they have just generic songs now in their opens, which sucks.
Yeah, that does. That's terrible.
It stinks.
Maybe that makes me think, though, maybe we should start being some generic songwriters, composers.
Yeah.
Rip off some heavy metal, because you just change one note and that flies, right?
I think about it all the time in some reality shows. I like to watch Ink Master, and they have some songs that are like, this is like if Nine Inch Nails was copyright free, which some of Nine Inch Nails is copyright free. But, or, some other stuff where you're like, this is our AC/DC equivalent song to get you pumped up in a movie where we didn't have budget for the AC/DC song.
Right. It sounds very like AC/DC, but it's ACBC.
It just makes me think of Peter Clavin from Forgetting Sarah Marshall, where he's the soundtrack guy for that terrible cop show. I can't think of the name of it.
Maybe we just hire the guy who made the Mikko Rantanen song to just make more songs for the Avalanche, because that one slapped. That one was so good, right?
Somebody still needs to make the JT Comfort goal song. I mean, how hard is it? It's been around forever.
Can't be that hard. But with the Mikko Rantanen song, it was announced.
Oh, you want dark and ominous.
Nailed it, Danny. Nailed it.
It was announced this past week, no surprise really, that the Avalanche will be going to Finland to play the Columbus Blue Jackets. Something we expected this year, wasn't able to happen. Something that was supposed to happen the previous year as well. But sounds like it's finally announced, ready to go, ready to rock. Part of me was a little confused because I think you and I discussed this a couple months ago, right? I don't even remember why or what, but we knew this was coming. But then I'm listening to NHL Network, and they're like, oh, well, this Finland game is likely going to be, I forget what two teams they brought up. I think it was Dallas and Nashville.
Any
or something
team
like.
with more than two Finns.
And so now I'm starting to second guess myself, like, wait, why would they just push Mikko Rantanen aside? And are they expecting Patrick Laine to not be in Columbus anymore? What's the deal? But it's nice. It helps me pat myself on the back knowing that we were right, that this was still going to happen this year.
It's just weird to me that there's like 4 Finns total on both teams. You know, like it's not like 2 Finn-laden teams, so it's just strange.
Yeah, but big names, right? I think Mikko Rantanen, considering what he's done in his short time in the NHL, is probably a big name back there in Finland.
I mean, like Sweden, it seemed like made so much sense before because there are so many Swedes playing. But
it's going to be fun trying to do a hockey show from Finland. I mean, I don't know how good our remote equipment is, but does it span across the Atlantic Ocean, Danny? I mean, do you think we can get a setup going?
You're going to have to check into the show budget and see if we can take you out
live from Helsinki.
Well, I think somebody's got to be here to run the board. But as long as you've got Wi-Fi, we should be all right.
All right.
Somebody get Nate on the phone. We'll figure it out.
Moving on. I actually wanted to get to this all stinking week because it literally rattled my bones deep down. Friend of the show, Greg Wyshynski, who I think he likes rattling people's bones every once in a while.
Who doesn't like it?
Comes out with his column this week that says the NHL should absolutely expand its playoffs and have more play-in rounds, much like the NBA is doing. Now, he had the chance to discuss this on the Merrick show, right, where they do their little rehash of the MVSW podcast. And in that show, he said one thing that really stood out to me. Oh, if Dallas makes it into these playoffs and is that 8 seed to play Colorado, then indeed, Suter was right. This is going to be a quick 8 days. In the same breath, he's trying to argue the fact that we need more playoff teams. I mean, you look at the standings right now, right? And you've got, like you mentioned earlier, Vancouver down there, Winnipeg down there, Anaheim down there. Those are teams that don't deserve even a sniff of a playoff spot or a play-in game. I mean, we're talking here, Dallas and Vegas barely deserve a playoff game. You look at LA backing their way into the playoff kind of down the stretch here. Don't exactly ring as a, hey, we're a big playoff contender, let us in the playoffs. So I think right now the NHL is a little bit more watered down to where you don't even have 8 playoff teams per side, let alone 12, which would be the ultimate goal, right, with those play-in games. So I think the current state of the NHL has no room for an expanded playoff. You water down the playoffs. The NHL is already seemingly watered down as it is right now. I'm out on this idea. I absolutely hate it, and it feels insulting. I'm insulted by it.
I was trying to find a retweet. It must have disappeared about this specifically. Wyshynski retweeted this guy who talked about the amount of teams who used to make the playoffs versus now. When it comes down to a percentage of the league, it used to be far higher than it is currently. And we just added 2 teams to this league, right? So there are more teams now than have ever been in this league. And the playoffs have not changed. So we're at a 50% playoff scenario. If you expand the playoffs, you give those teams that aren't within sniffing distance something to play for, right? If you're down the stretch and you don't have much to play for, if you're Philly and you're benching Keith Yandel so some of the young guys to come up, you're saying there's literally nothing to play for except for jobs for next year. How does that change if there's still an opportunity to get into a play-in game? You know? How does that change for a team like Edmonton who's been on the cusp a couple years and probably could have done a little damage in the postseason? You know, I think that there's an opportunity here to increase it back to a ratio that makes more sense than just 50%, while also offering teams a little more to play for down the stretch when they're not in the top 8.
So what does that do to the regular season? What does that do to the first half of the regular season?
You hate the regular season anyway.
So now we're just going to make it meaningless by adding 24 teams into the
hold
playoffs.
On, you already think that the regular season and the President's Trophy and all that is meaningless.
No, I'm the other boat. I say that the President's Trophy should be held in higher regard than the Stanley Cup playoffs, and this helps me prove my point because the Stanley Cup playoffs are proving to be more and more of a gimmick every single year when the best teams aren't making it into the final even, let alone winning it.
Well, would you rather just play the regular season and the President's Trophy winner wins the Stanley Cup?
No, I'd rather we hold a parade for the President's Trophy winner, say, good job, you won the regular season. Now here's our side tournament of a secondary trophy that's maybe less important, but the Stanley Cup just throughout the years has grown to be this prominent trophy that everybody loves, and I'm okay with that because I like the attention that the NHL world gets with it, but it just strikes me as such more of a gimmick, and especially if you let more teams in. I mean, look at Tampa Bay. We talk about it all year long. They haven't exactly been the powerhouse team. They weren't last year. They weren't even the year before. Get to the playoffs, turn it on, win it all. So what's the point of the regular season if you're just going to take it with that approach? You're going to see a lot more. What do they do in NBA? The load management. You're going to see a lot more of that.
We're already seeing it. You're already seeing it with the Avalanche.
And is that not a terrible thing? Is that not a bad step in the wrong direction for the NHL as a whole?
It's just the evolution of where the game's at now. Guys, if you can afford to rest guys so they're 100% in the playoffs, you're going to do it.
So let's look at the teams 16 to 24, right? These are these bubble teams that might get a play-in chance. Dallas, or I guess we'll start with Vegas. Vegas, Vancouver, Winnipeg, who we've known has had a terrible year.
Sure, but you want to see Connor, hold on, you want to see Connor Hellebuck in the postseason.
Not if he doesn't deserve it.
I think that'd be pretty exciting. But if we expand the playoff field, then he does deserve it.
I'd love to see Matt Beniers in the playoff.
Yeah,
I'd
I would love
to
to see
Cole Caulfield,
Vancouver
Carey
in the playoffs.
Price should be in the playoffs, right?
Well, why don't you just draft a fantasy playoff team then?
Why don't we just make it a 32-team playoff?
Well, that's dumb.
So is having 24 teams.
So is having 16 teams then.
Why?
Why is it any different?
You have to be in the upper echelon. You have to at least be the upper half to qualify for
yeah,
the
but you're just
trophy.
drawing an arbitrary line at what the upper echelon is.
No,
what I'm saying is
historically,
right it wasn't the top 50%.
Yeah, when the league was too small and they had to make it 16 to have it make sense. You can't have a playoff with 14 teams. You either have to have 16 or 8. They're not going to go 8.
Buys.
Come on. That really jumbles the whole
thing.
What
you don't want to see is a scenario like the NFL's play-in scenario where, you know, these teams that probably shouldn't be making it are getting crushed by the team that eventually goes on to win the Super Bowl or whatever, right? These teams that are way more dominant. You're not wanting to see that, but I think you could expand 2 to 4 more teams into this scenario and it would be fine. The integrity of the playoffs would still be there.
Okay, so you're saying if Anaheim were to somehow win
Take
those...
the whole league. Let's look at the whole league.
So I'm on 22. Anaheim, they'd be probably in that play-in game. So let's say Anaheim wins.
Over Vancouver, Vegas, or Winnipeg?
Let's just say if Anaheim wins and then they're playing the Colorado Avalanche in round 1, you don't think that's a blowout? That's a waste of everyone's time?
I don't think that would be the way playoffs should be seeded.
What do you mean?
I think you could make the bottom 2 teams in a wild card scenario play each other for a final spot. So in
Right.
the first round, the 2 bottom teams play each other. The 2 worst of the worst play each other. Then you reseed from there.
Reseeding. There's an idea.
Well, you do a bit of, first versus worst, but I don't think it's a benefit for the top team to play a newly added expansion playoff spot.
Right.
You play those 2 teams against each other, and then you go.
So you're just
top
carving
down.
an easier path for these wild card teams that don't even deserve to be in the playoffs in the first place.
If we expanded
one of
the
them gets a
playoffs,
ticket to the second round.
Saying they don't deserve it is just based on 16 teams. If it was 18 teams, if it was 20 teams, then they would be deserving it.
Let's just let all 32 in.
Okay.
Let's do it.
This is why you can't argue with this man, Danny.
I
He's
just
that
don't. I
guy.
don't see your point. It
He's
makes
that
no
guy.
sense. It's watering down the playoffs. If anything, I would
No.
rather they just get back to the 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6 format before letting more teams that clearly don't deserve to be in there. I mean, New York Islanders at 20, terrible year.
Sure, but this
Had
whole
zero
argument is
business.
just predicated on let's not change it because it is what it is now.
No,
Erroneous!
it's predicated on how
Erroneous on both counts.
worse of a product it's going to be.
You heard Vince Vaughn. Erroneous.
You don't make sense. Your point is entirely just like a ton of hockey
can't
players.
even reiterate it
just
to
like
me because
a
he's
ton
not
of hockey
listening
fans,
to it.
You have the same mindset. Oh well, you just want it to be that way because it's the same as always, and you fear change. No, it makes no effing sense to change it this way. I'm heated. That's the end of the show, Ryan. You're wrong.
Look,
I'm
he's
right.
gonna end it.
This
He's
is the
gonna
Hockey
end it.
Show. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Thanks for watching on Twitch. Thanks for listening on podcast platforms. And thanks for listening live on FM radio. We're going to go hug it out.
Tweet us and tell us who's right.
The guy shows up late and then thinks he can make these ridiculous comments. Thanks for hanging out. We'll be back next week for a playoff edition. Whoop, whoop. Let's get it going. The Hockey Show. Thanks for hanging out. JJ Jerez, Ryan Bolding, Danny Bailey. We'll be back. See ya.